Good afternoon, or for our friends in Asia, good evening. This is Shawn O'Connor, founder and CEO of Stratus, and I am so excited to be with all of you today to share my insight scoop, the 10 must-have for getting into a top business school in round two. We are so excited to be, as always, presenting this with our good friends at Visa GMAT. So without further ado, let me show you our agenda for today, and we'll go from there. So first, I'll just start with some introductions. So for those of you who don't know me or don't know Stratus Prep, I'll just spend a couple of minutes sharing a little bit about our story. And then after that, we will talk about, in general, what business schools are looking for and sort of how you compete with other students and how that entire process works. Then I'm going to give you my top 10, the top 10 must-have if you want to get into a top choice business school in round two. And I'll give you a hint, getting started now is critically important. And then we'll talk about key takeaways. So we'll talk about, what do you really need to do? What is the summary of the takeaways from today's presentation to best position yourself for success in round two? Now, if you have any questions at any time during the broadcast, please go ahead and type those into the questions box in your GoToMeeting webinar toolbar. And I will respond to them just as soon as I can. So, at any time, please go ahead and type your questions in. And when we get to an appropriate stopping point, I will be happy to go over them. I'll also take questions at the end of the section. All right, so this is me. I am Shawn O'Connor, and I founded Stratus Prep about 8 years ago. Myself, sort of doing test prep and admissions counseling out of my apartment in New York City. And over the last 8 years, we've grown to a team of more than 40 people. We work with clients all over the world. This year, we will work with clients in more than 50 countries in almost every American state. I did both my MBA and my law degree at Harvard, where I was a Baker Scholar in the business school. I did my undergraduate at Georgetown School of Foreign Service. I did have a 780 on the GMAT and have been preparing people for the last 10 years for that test. And I've also working with students on admissions counseling for the last over 10 years. Before starting Stratus Prep, I worked with McKinsey & Company as a consultant and worked in investment banking with Lehman Brothers. I am the author of Forbes' column, The Launching Pad, which is about MBA admissions as well as about entrepreneurship. And as you may know, I've been featured in the Wall Street Journal and Fortune and Bloomberg Business Week, Inc. magazine, CNN Money, the Financial Times, among many others. And then here's a little bit about Stratus Prep. So Stratus Prep has the most qualified GMAT and GRE tutors and the most qualified MBA admissions counselors anywhere in the world, bar none. So all of our tutors have scored 770 or higher on the GMAT. They've all graduated from top MBA programs, and they all have at least 2 years of experience before they join Stratus Prep. In addition, they are all full-time tutors with us. So you can be sure you're going to have their attention evening, noon, night, morning, whenever you need them, weekends as well, because this is their job. So they take it very seriously. In fact, just this weekend, we had 3 students take the test and get 740 and above. Needless to say, we were popping some champagne corks here as a result of those great scores this weekend. In terms of our admissions counselors, they have all graduated from top 5 MBA programs. So they have all graduated themselves from Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, Chicago, or Columbia. They also all have at least 2 years of admissions experience and at least 2 years successfully coaching applicants. And one of the real benefits of working with Stratus Prep on admissions counseling is, unlike at any other firm in the world, you're not just assigned to one counselor. You have a whole team helping you and supporting you. So you have your MBA admissions counselor. All of our counselors are full-time. They're only working with about 5 to 10 students per round. Then you have your school-specific essay readers, and they are experts, most of them former adcoms from the schools, who go over the essays at the end of the process in a mock admissions committee read. You have professional editors and proofreaders who are working with you on the writing. And then you have me, the founder and CEO, personally involved in your application in terms of reviewing the strategy, going over the outlines, and then finally conducting your final mock interviews. So I personally am going to sign off on all the new content that you create in this application process, which is why we have such high success rates. And this is perhaps my favorite slide. And so this slide indicates the chances of being admitted if you apply to a school by yourself or with another firm, and that would be in blue. And then the chances of being admitted if you work with Stratus Prep, which would be in orange. And what you can see here is there's lots of orange and very little blue. So if you work with us on 3 schools, any 3 schools of your choosing, there is a 99% historical chance that you will get into at least one of those schools. In fact, there's such a high probability that you'll get in that if you work with us on 3 or more schools, we will guarantee you admission. And if you're not admitted, we'll work with you for free the next year on 3 additional schools or the same 3 schools, whatever you prefer. Okay? So at Harvard, your chances go from about 12% if you apply on your own to about 60% if you work with us. At Stanford, from about 6% to 40%. And then at all the other schools here, from about 15 to 20% to approximately 70%. In terms of our GMAT prep, 80% of our students get 700 or better, and 90% get 650 or better. We've had clients who've increased by as many as 250 points. Okay, so we've had people who started in the 400s and 500s who ending up in the 700s. Okay, and we not only have our students get into these top schools, we also ensure that they get a lot of merit-based scholarships. Okay, Harvard and Stanford are the only 2 schools that do not offer full merit-based scholarships. Last year, our clients had full merit-based scholarships at Wharton, at Chicago, at Booth, okay, at MIT. And so, we had them at, basically all of the rest of the top 10 outside of Harvard and Stanford, which does not offer unsolicited full need-based scholarships. Great, so I'll stop here. There are a couple of questions. All right, so one question is, how much does being an older applicant and having 6 or 7 years of experience affect one's chances to top business schools, particularly Harvard, Stanford, Wharton? I have heard from 2 sources that the younger the better for these programs. I wouldn't say the younger the better. I mean, they certainly want people with experience. For Harvard and Stanford, the average is sort of in that 2 to 4 or 5 year range. For Wharton, it's a little bit higher, probably in the 3 to 6 year range. So you are on the higher end, but certainly very much in the running. We've had folks with 6, 7, 8 years of experience who have gotten into these schools. There are things you have to do differently on the application as a result of being an older applicant, but this is definitely something that we can help with. The next question, does Stratus Prep assist with admissions counseling for round 2? Absolutely. Now is the time to get started if you want to do round 2, because the longer we have working with you, the better off that we're going to be in terms of our ability to prepare you successfully. So definitely getting started sooner rather than later will be advantageous for you. Then the next question is, what steps should an Indian applicant take to apply in round 2 to the top schools? And so, we work with a lot of Indian applicants. It's our 2nd largest country after the U.S. Every year, we work with well over 100 Indian applicants. And so there are a lot of steps that we need to take. I need to know more about your profile and your background, and that's something we can talk about later on offline. But there are definitely some distinct steps that people in overrepresented groups, like Indian males in technology or males in New York City in finance, there are definitely steps, and there are different steps for each group that you can take to help set yourself apart. Okay, great. So keep those questions coming, and I'll be happy to answer them as we go through the presentation today. So as I mentioned, last year, Stratus Prep worked with, we are a truly global firm, students in 32 countries and 39 U.S. states. Last year, we had clients in every continent except Antarctica. So if you know anybody there in Antarctica, living in a base camp, looking to apply to business school, please send him or her my way, because I'd love to get that 7th continent checked off my to-do list, okay? But last year we worked with folks in North and South America, in Africa, in Europe, in Asia, and in Australia, as well as New Zealand. So definitely, please, know that we can work with you anywhere in the world. So let's now talk about who you are really competing against in the MBA admissions process. a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that they are competing against the entire pool of applicants, the other 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 students applying. They think they're competing against all of them, when in reality, that is not the case. You are competing against students who are most similar to you, students from the same region, students from the same industry or function, students from the same gender, because even though business school is about 60 to 65% male and about 30 to 35% female, there is a larger number of students, okay, who apply who are males. It's about 80, 75 to 80 to 25 to 20% male to female in the applicant pool. So it is different if you're applying as a male. It's a little bit more competitive than if you're applying as a female. So if you are a male technologist in India, you're competing against other male technologists from India. If you are a woman in Hong Kong who works in marketing, you're competing against other female marketers in Hong Kong and other parts of Asia, but principally Hong Kong. If you're a male investment banker in New York City, you're competing against other male investment bankers in New York City. And so what this means is it's not going to set you apart. It's not going to help you into the schools to just generally speak about what the work is of an investment banker or to try to talk about the size of your deals or anything like that, because you will always lose, because there will always be somebody else who has a better deal, a bigger deal, a different deal. What you need to do is leverage your personal background to set you apart from this very competitive applicant pool. That is the successful approach to MBA admissions. Is you need to understand who you're competing against, and then obviously demonstrate that you are stellar professionally, but the way you actually get in is differentiating yourself in terms of your personal story. And that is what we spend so much time focusing on with our clients to really make them pop and stand out. All right. So when business schools receive your application, how do they go about evaluating you? Some of them just have one reader who decides whether you get an interview or not. Other schools have two readers who each score you, and then those scores are combined to determine if you get an interview or not. When we talk about what would drive people's decisions to invite you for an interview or to give you a high versus a low score, we can sort of think about it in three different buckets from the perspective of an MBA admissions reader at one of your schools. First, we have the vital stats. We have the GMAT score, which, as we'll talk about, is more important for schools 3 through 15 than it is for schools 1 and 2, Harvard and Stanford, but the GMAT score. And in some cases, the quant score within GMAT will also be important. Then we'll look at work experience, and you want to be entering. So by the time you get to business school, so right now you have to have at least 1 year, so that by the time you get there, you would have at least 2 years of business experience, professional full-time work experience. But you can have much more than that. As we were talking about earlier, you can have 6, 7, 8 years and still be competitive. They're going to want to see that you're a leader. What leadership positions, which don't need to be formal leadership, it can be informal leadership, but what leadership positions have you taken on professionally and in your extracurricular activities? And then finally, your undergraduate GPA. And if your GPA is a little lower, let me give you some good news. This is only a concern at the top couple of schools, Harvard and Stanford principally. We've had people not only get into Wharton, but get significant $20,000 a year merit-based scholarships. And this was a male overrepresented from New York in finance. So you definitely can get into schools even with a sub 3 out of 4 GPA, top 5, top 10 schools, if your application is super strong. Because what folks don't realize, and this is especially challenging for international applicants, is that in the U.S. and also in schools in Europe and Asia like ISB, like INSEAD, like HEC Paris and IE and IESC, and LBS, for schools in Europe that use the American admissions model and all American schools, the quantitative metrics, the GMAT score and the GPA, those are just to make sure you don't fail out. Those don't get you in. People get rejected with 780s from Harvard every year. What gets you in is all of the qualitative elements, the essays, the resume, the recommendations, the short answer questions, okay, the interview, those are the things that get you in. And that's why we've had a 590 get into HBS. We've had a number of folks under 3.0 get in with scholarship to Wharton. Okay, we've had people in the low 600 get into Stanford. Is because it's not primarily quantitative. It's not the way admissions works in India or China, for example. The next thing, and perhaps the most important thing in terms of standing out that the schools are looking for, is your unique personal story. Who are you? In fact, that's Chicago's interview essay questions this year. They tell you who they are, and then they ask who you are, and that's it. Okay? What are your greatest accomplishments? What obstacles or challenges or setbacks have you faced? That's a question at Kellogg. What diverse perspectives would you bring to the class? This is integrated into many questions. So they really want to understand from a personal level, who are you? What inspires you? What makes you different? Okay? And then why business school? Why do you need an MBA? Why do you need to go to this particular school? Why, why now? Why is now the right time in your career? What's the transition that you're making right now that means an MBA would make sense for you? And what are your unique contributions to the class going to be? Okay? And you really need to emphasize why this particular school, especially schools like Columbia, Tufts, NYU Stern, okay? You can have great numbers, but if you don't convince these schools that you really need to be there, you're not going to be there, no matter how good your numbers are. Okay? So yes, we got to look at the stats, but we also got to look at our personal story and why business school. Part of the reason that we've been so successful with domestic and especially with international applicants is by focusing on these second two areas. We've had many applicants who say, gosh, in India there were many people with better scores and grades than me, but I got into Harvard because we worked together to craft my personal story and to really demonstrate why I had to be at Harvard or Stanford. So to summarize, getting into a top school takes 5 things. It takes time. Time to write your essays, time to prepare your recommenders, time to prepare for the GMAT. It requires being introspective. You've got to really dig deep. You've got to really understand who you are, what makes you tick, what were your formative experiences, okay? Then you've got to differentiate yourself from not only the entire global applicant pool, but from other people who are similar to you. You've also got to customize that application for each individual school. And then I think it would be absolutely crazy to not depend on committed, seasoned experts to review and edit your essays and your resume and your short answers and your recommendations if your recommenders give you copies and your interview prep and your financial aid negotiations. You are about to buy a very expensive house. Between the cost of tuition and living expenses and travel expenses, plus the opportunity cost of leaving the business world for 2 years, you will spend in total between $300,000 and $450,000. That buys a pretty nice house in a lot of parts of the world. A $300,000 to $450,000 investment. Nobody would buy a house without a realtor and a real estate attorney. You should not be buying an MBA degree without seasoned experts who have the knowledge that comes from having done this more than 2,000 times. Okay? We've helped more than 2,000 candidates, which means we've worked on almost 10,000 total applications. That is incredible in terms of the knowledge and the experience that we're going to be able to lend to you so that you don't make mistakes, you get into the best school possible, you get in with the highest amount of money. All right, so I'll take a couple more questions before we get to my top 10 list. Another question about age. Is the average age of admission younger for females than for males at the most selective schools? So it is true that younger female applicants do have a slightly better chance than younger male applicants. The reason for that is schools, in a completely sexist way, think that women applicants will probably step out of the workforce at some time to go ahead and have kids, which may or may not happen, and it may or may not happen sooner rather than later. But the schools want you to complete the MBA, and they want you to have enough time to really be able to take advantage of the MBA and building your career, and so they are even more lenient with women, taking women who have 2 and 3 years of work experience, where they may not be quite as lenient with male applicants. Another age question on the age topic is an age of 38 to 40, precluding a reasonable chance at admission to top schools. If you're 38 to 40, I would need to know more about your story, but we may want to look at certain schools that are very favorable, like Booth is very favorable to older applicants in the top 5 schools. We also may want to look at different alternative programs at other schools, so schools that like the MFX program at Stanford, where you'll still get a great network of people, maybe better than the MBA program. So we would look at each school, your age, your experience, what you've done, why an MBA, to figure out where should we apply to the regular program where might we want to consider an alternative program, and where would be best not to apply. What is a reasonable GMAT score? What is a recommended minimum score for the top business schools? So your goal should be to get about a 700 or above, although we have many folks who get into top business schools below that, but that is a good goal minimum for you on the GMAT if you're looking at these top schools. Can you describe some of the female group characteristics for U.S. applicants? How does geography affect this aspect? Being in New York or California, is that more competitive as opposed to the South and Midwest? It's not like college, so they're not really worried about what part of the country you're from. They're really more concerned about male applicants, female applicants, things like that. So I wouldn't say there's any defining characteristic of female American applicants. It'll matter more like a female consultant versus a female marketer versus a female banker. That'll be more sort of the category that they're looking at versus women generally. But it's not like undergrad where there's some advantage to being from, Montana or something like that. That's just not the case. All right, great. Well, let's march on. So now we get to my top 10 must-haves. What do you need to be doing now to prepare yourself for round 2? So the first thing is let's talk about academic performance. At Harvard and Stanford, they care the most about GPA. They actually care much less about GMAT. The high average GMAT at Harvard and Stanford is an effect rather than a cause. If they didn't look at all of the GMATs of the people they take, they would still have the same average, very high average GMAT score, because they tend to take people from top companies, from top undergrads who have high GPAs, and there's a high correlation between those three things and having a pretty good GMAT score. But if you have all those things but a low GMAT score, you definitely can get in, as we've seen, with people as low as the high 500s getting into HBS results. With Wharton and other top 10 schools, they care much more about the GMAT and much less about the GPA. Wharton in particular likes to see a 49 or higher on the quant. Okay? So Wharton actually doesn't care about the overall number as much as they care about the specific quant score, and they're looking for 80th percent or above, so 49 is the 79th percent. That's good enough. So they're looking for a 49, 50, 51. Other quant-heavy schools are probably more looking for like a 47, so like an MIT or a Chicago. They would be looking for like a 47 on the quant. So remember I said sometimes you have to look at the quant in particular as well as the overarching score, where we should be aiming for 700, 720. Once you get above 730, 740, getting a higher score is a waste of your time. It is completely diminished returns. A 740 versus a 760 versus a 780 does not increase your chances at all. At that point, you are in their highest GMAT bucket, and the only thing that's going to help you at that point is having great essays, great resumes, great recommendations, great interview. Those are the things that are going to set you apart to get in, okay? It's not going to be getting a couple more points on the GMAT at that point. Number 2, you want to demonstrate a really strong, solid work history. So how do we go about doing that? How do we do it in recommendations? How do we do it in the resume? How do we do it in the short answer questions? So first and foremost, you've got to show impact, okay? And this is an essay question in a number of schools, okay? In fact, leadership impact is a main question at Kellogg this year. It's the number 2 question. So you want to show your impact, and you want to, wherever possible, show it quantitatively as well as qualitatively. So maybe percent of cost saved, or amount of new revenues generated, or percent of productivity increased, okay? So we want to show impact. We want to show that because of our work and our leadership, the company is better off. You also, if you have them, want to demonstrate promotion, okay? Promotions are really important as well. If you haven't been promoted and you've only been there a couple of years, that's understandable. If you've been somewhere 4 or 5 years and you haven't been promoted, whether formally or informally, so an informal promotion is maybe they don't change your title, but you're doing different work, you're taking on much more significant responsibilities. Hopefully we can get an actual title change, but we need to do one of those. They like to see entrepreneurship and innovation. So this is easy, obviously, if you work at a startup or you started something yourself, but they also care about entrepreneurship and innovation for intrapreneurs, people who work at Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies, but are being innovative, are being entrepreneurial day to day in their work. So we need to show solid work performance, really strong, differentiated work performance that sets us apart and above from our fellow colleagues, because The fact of the matter is, if you are a banker at JP Morgan, you're not only competing against other, if you're a male, other male bankers in New York, you're competing against other male bankers in New York at JP Morgan because they're only going to take so many people from JP Morgan at every single school. Next, you want to look at international experience. And this has to be more than study abroad. Everybody, or certainly a lot of people, have done study abroad. That is not going to cut it. Those words should not enter your lips or come out of your printer as you're writing your essays. We need to focus on more extensive experiences that are sort of differentiated. This could be work experience, whether you went abroad and worked for a couple of years in a different country than your home country. Could also be working on a diverse cross-national team. Maybe you sit in Milwaukee, but one of your colleagues sits in Manila and another colleague sits in Mumbai. Okay, well then that works. That is a global international experience. It could also be service trips. Maybe you worked with orphans affected by HIV/AIDS in South Africa, okay? Or maybe you've worked with children in the favelas in Brazil. That would count as well, as long as it's substantial. It can't be like 5 days. It's got to be a little bit more than that. But substantial work or extracurricular experiences beyond study abroad. Okay, now Fulbrights would count, for example, any sort of graduate studies, Rhodes, Fulbright, Marshall, those would count. So it could be service projects, work, and you could actually be going abroad or working on a cross-cultural team. Number 4, we need to see a commitment to 1 or 2 extracurricular activities, but this commitment must be strong and deep. And they want something more than just fundraising. Fundraising alone is not going to be enough. Anybody can throw a party and invite rich people to come drop off a check. You've got to show really high-level impact. You've got to show that you're using your strategic thinking. Ideally, you're on the board or the junior board, the young professionals board of 1 or 2 of these organizations. They know you don't get as much leadership experience at work because you're relatively junior in your career. So they want to see community service and extracurricular activities, not because they're just looking for you to do good for others. Of course, they want you to care about your neighbor and things like that. But what they're really using this extracurricular and community service work to measure is they are looking for, do you think strategically, do you lead, do you have impact when given the opportunity to step up to the plate? Number 5, we want to try to demonstrate leadership in other ways. And I've just listed a few examples here, but these are only examples. You don't have to have one of these. But beyond work and beyond your extracurriculars, you want to try to show other leadership experience. So this could be through athletics. Maybe you were a captain of a football team or a basketball team or a swim team. This could be through the military. So that's the U.S. military. For example, we had a number of applicants from the Indian military and from the Singaporean military who were very successful last year. A couple got into HBS and Stanford. Could be through student government in college. Okay, it could be through professional organizations like IEEE for engineers. It could be leadership within your family. That's been a great example in the past. But we need to demonstrate leadership, a habit of leadership, as HBS would call it, outside of just your day-to-day community service and professional experience. This is really important. All right, so we'll stop here for a moment, let everybody catch their breath, and let me go through a couple more questions. Is it possible for a student to get admitted with a low GPA? So hopefully, we just illustrated that it absolutely is. We have folks getting in with, 3.0, 2.7, 2.9 to top 5 schools. What rounds do you recommend to apply to for Duke, UVA, Columbia? Well, if Columbia is one of your top choices, then I would definitely try to apply early decision for Columbia, which is due October 8th. And if we got to work right away, we could help you with that. We do have over a month, so that is enough time, or just about a month, I should say. For Duke, I would do there round 1 if you can, which is late October. I think it's the 20th. And for UVA, it's fine to do round 2. Duke, I don't like to do round 2 because they do have the early round in about 10 days. You don't need to do the early round because that's binding, but you can do the round 1, which is in October. Okay? All right, so Stratus Prep assists in providing scholarships. So we don't provide scholarships, but we help you obtain scholarships and negotiate with schools and organizations to get scholarships. So we don't have the money to give out ourselves. We help you get the scholarship money. But yes, that is very much a part of the service. I'm applying to all of my target schools in round 2. Does that reduce my odds of getting admitted? No, that's totally fine to apply to all of your schools in round 2. Many people do that. And in round 2, many folks get in, because a lot of the schools give out 50 to 60% of their spots in round 2, so it's totally fine to be applying in round 2. All right, so somebody said, if I'm a female in finance in India, will I be judged against other Asians, other Americans? You're going to be primarily judged against other Indian women in finance. That's going to be the primary group that they are looking for in assessing your profile. There is much discussion about fit for MBA schools. Are there any schools that you would say are such polar opposite cultures that it would not be wise to apply to both? Okay, I think that, probably there are things that would appeal to different people about different schools. So, for example, if you really like communities, okay, you're going to love UVA, you're going to love Tufts, you're going to love Kellogg, because they're not in the middle of big cities. They're in smaller towns. They're a little bit more remote. You'd also love Duke, okay? So if you want sort of the American typical collegiate experience, really tight-knit class, you can get that, particularly strongly at those schools. If you don't want that as much, you may want to go to a school in the middle of a city like Wharton or NYU or Columbia or Booth, where you can have that culture experience, but it's not as common. You're not only reliant on the people in your class to build relationships with, you can have your own other friends in the city. And then there are schools that are much more quantitative, like Columbia or Chicago or MIT or Wharton, and schools that are much less quantitative, like HBS or Kellogg. So depending on, when we work with students, we give them 10 questions that we ask them rank. Do you want more quantitative or less quantitative? Do you want more of a small-town campus or more of an urban location? And we do that on 10 different factors that help us figure out the best schools for you, the ones that will be the best fit, because we visit these schools all the time. We know them extremely well. All right, well, let's march on with our top 10 now. So we did 1 through 5. So just to review, in terms of number 1, we've got to look at academic performance, which for most schools is the GMAT, and maybe in particular the quant GMAT. For other schools like Harvard and Stanford, it'll be the GPA. And then we talked about work history and having impact and demonstrating that impact through promotions, and whether you are an entrepreneur or not, demonstrating entrepreneurship and innovation, or as I would call it, intrapreneurship. Then we talked about the importance of having global experiences, more than just study abroad, and this could be work, this could be service projects, okay, and these could be on the ground in another country or working with a cross-cultural team. Then we talked about, really deep commitment to a couple of extracurricular or community service activities, and hopefully being on a board or a junior board, and not just working on fundraising, but demonstrating impact and strategic thinking. And then finally, I talked about demonstrating leadership, whether it's through your family or athletics or the military or student government or professional organization. So now we come to number 6, and this is critically important both to the essays and to the interviews. You need a clear and attainable short and long-term goal, okay, that should be for-profit in most cases, but will still contribute significantly to society. And it's got to be something unique. If you're an Indian male, the last thing you want to do is say management consulting. I won't allow it, okay? Because every Indian male from a technology background seems to think that they should say management consulting. So you're not going to stand out. We need to come up with something better, something more unique. Now you say, but when, a lot of people go into management consulting in the schools, yes, but that doesn't mean that's what the schools are trying to admit into their class. Just because you go into management consulting does not mean that's what you put on your application, and certainly does not mean that's what the school is looking for. Schools really generally don't necessarily want people who are doing management consulting. In fact, the dean, not the dean of admissions, but the dean of Harvard said the last thing the world needs is more investment bankers and management consultants, because there's not a lot necessarily of contributing to society and building a business that you do in these roles, okay? So I was a management consultant. I loved it. I did it with 2 different companies, including McKinsey. But for your application, if everybody else is saying that, you need to come up with something more differentiated and unique, okay? And you should demonstrate doing well and doing good. So Apple, right? Apple has made a ton of money over the last 10 or 20 years, but they also have done so much good for the world. Right now, you can FaceTime with your nieces and nephews, even if they're halfway around the world, right? All you need is an internet connection. So you can do well and do good at the same time. Okay, you can create jobs while generating profit. Okay, So you need an idea that is unique to you, that includes doing well and doing good. Number 7, we need references. And these references have to be superlative. In the U.S., everything is exaggerated, okay? So if they say you're good, it means you're fair. If they say you're fair, it means you're poor. If they say you're poor, it means you lost your job, okay? What we need these recommenders to say is you were exemplary, one of a kind, one of a lifetime, exceptional, because that means excellent or pretty good, right? Because everything is exaggerated in the recommendation process. So if your recommenders aren't exaggerated, we're going to have a problem. You want those recommenders to demonstrate analytical rigor, okay? So they should demonstrate your quantitative skills, your analytical rigor. This is really important for those fun schools like Wharton, Chicago, Columbia, MIT. But they should also demonstrate your soft skills, your leadership skills, your collaboration skills, your communication skills. Those are really important for other schools, like a Harvard or a Kellogg or an NYU or a UCLA that focus more on soft skill development. Then we need a resume, and this resume has to show impact. And it should only be one page, okay? I've been running this company after starting it 8 years ago. I worked at McKinsey, I worked at Lehman Brothers, went to law school, business school, had a Fulbright scholarship, went to undergrad, speak 3 languages. I'm able to get it all onto one page. You can and will get it all onto one page. So we want a one-page resume that demonstrates impact, and in order to demonstrate impact, that uses quantitative and qualitative evidence. That is critically important. You also need a clear reason why you need to go to this particular school and get an MBA this year. So be sure to talk about more than just the technical skills. You don't want to say, well, I need to learn how to build, discounted cash flow models. You can learn that on Coursera. You don't need Harvard Business School for that, okay? We need to go beyond the technical skills. If you're applying to top 10 schools, obviously you're going to need and get the technical skills. That's not what's going to get you in. And, okay, you need to demonstrate why this particular top MBA program is absolutely essential for what you're trying to accomplish. So we really need to convince them, hey, I got to go this year. I got to get an MBA specifically from your school so that I can realize the goals that I've set for myself that will have a positive social impact as well. And then number 10, I think it is imperative, whether you do it with us or someone else, that you get professional expert help. Did you know that according to the schools themselves, 57% of people in the most recent survey, 57% of admitted students said in an anonymous survey to the school they were attending that they had used a professional admissions consultant, okay? 57%. Now, if you consider that there is a good number of people who would never admit to this even in a confidential survey, they don't believe it's really confidential, it's done online, maybe that unique was linked, maybe they're going to find out that I used an admissions counselor. There's probably some 10, 15, 20% of people who won't admit to using a consultant. And then there's obviously some folks in, certain emerging markets where they just don't have the financial power to be able to hire professional consultants. When you consider those two factors, in major cities, Delhi, Mumbai, Hong Kong, London, Sao Paulo, San Francisco, New York, Boston, you're probably talking 70 to 80% of the serious top 10 applicants are using a consultant. And so just to get on par, you've got to use a consultant. And then to get an advantage, I believe, you've got to use a great consultant with a team approach. We have 4 people working with you, so no matter who your application is read by, it is really going to resonate with them, okay? Because we're going to have a male in finance and a female in marketing both look at it to make sure it resonates with everyone, every possible reader. Also, you want to make sure that whoever you use, like us, releases school-by-school statistics and overall statistics since inception. No other major firm does that. We'll let you speak to references. Almost no other firm lets you do that. So there should be transparency. If a firm isn't transparent, there's a reason for that. All right, so just to review our second 5, okay? First, we need to have a clear, concise, short and long-term goal that's unique from everybody else, that really differentiates yourself, and demonstrates that you'll do well financially, that the company will be financially sustainable, but that you'll also be doing good socially. We need references, so we're going to use specific examples to demonstrate that you are truly extraordinary, that you are absolutely exceptional, that you stand out both quantitatively and qualitatively in terms of those soft skills from others at your firm and from others like you. Nobody cares about how high up or how famous the recommender is. They care about what they say. Number 8, you need a resume that really demonstrates using quantitative and qualitative evidence the impacts that you've had. Number 9, you need to clearly articulate why you need to go to this business school this year. You need to go beyond just talking about technical skills. You need to show why this school is essential to craft you into the leader you hope to be so you can achieve your goals. And then number 10, I think it would be crazy not to use a professional consultant to help you through this important, once-in-a-lifetime challenging experience. Okay. So next I want to show you a few case studies of people that we've worked with. So we have Rob, he went to a top 25 non-Ivy League undergraduate college, a state school that was not UVA or Michigan, but a decent state school. He had a 3.7 GPA, so a strong GPA, and a 700 on the GMAT. Last year he was admitted to Stanford. We have Alex, who has a 670 on the GMAT and 4 years of experience. Okay, so a much lower GMAT. He had a good GPA. He got into both HBS and Stanford. Okay, Rob worked in consulting. Alex worked in financial services. They both were overrepresented males. Victor, okay, 3.0 when converted to a 4.0 scale and a 670. He was from a non-IIT university in India. He was a former management consultant and an entrepreneur. He got into HBS. You can bet that it was not because of his numbers. It was because of the story that he told. And then Jennifer, who went to a top 25 undergrad, 2.7 and a 720, admitted to Wharton. So what are my key takeaways? Recognize that it takes a lot of time and that it is difficult to get into business school. Be prepared. Give yourself that time to make sure you put together an absolutely stellar application. Write what each of the individual top schools are really looking for, and then rely on seasoned experts. So recognize how difficult it is. Give yourself enough time. Sell what the business schools, the individual business schools are looking to buy, customize, and then depend on seasoned experts who really know how to help you put your best foot forward. So this is our exclusive partnership offer for all of our good friends joining us today from Beat the GMAT. I'm happy to offer a complimentary 30-minute consultation with myself, okay? You get one of these per life. Yes, we do check, okay? We have everyone's resume who's ever done a consultation. You know, we have many ways of checking. So you want to make sure first that you have not done this before. If you have not, you can go ahead and sign up for a consultation by emailing us at consult@stratusprep.com or giving us a call at 212-307-1788. We're also happy to offer you a 15% discount that is only good until September 25th with the discount code, all capitals, BTG15. So if you'd like to sign up for admissions counseling, it's based on the number of schools we're going to help you with. It's a flat fee, unlimited hours. For GMAT and GRE tutoring, it's based on the number of hours. We have 10-hour, 20-hour, 30-hour, 50-hour, and 100-hour packages. You can go onto our website, click Enroll Now at the top of the page, and that's how you get enrolled. Okay, and just on the final page as you're checking out in the discount code section, BTG15, all caps. If you apply with at least 3 schools with Stratus Prep, so at least 3 schools with Stratus Prep, we do give you our guarantee that if you don't get in, we will work with you on any 3 schools of your choice next year at no additional charge. And we are always happy to connect you with references. We want to be completely transparent. We'll tell you our success rate overall, 99%, and then individual schools, and we will give you references as much as you want to make sure you are completely comfortable and can trust in us. Okay? So if you want to reach out, get signed up, get more information, to get a consult, to get a reference, email us at consult@stratusprep.com or give us a call, 212-307-1788. All right, so I will be happy now to take additional questions. First question, I was wondering how I can compensate for the lack of work experience in my application. Well, it depends. If you're going to be entering school with at least 2 years of work experience, so if you have 1 year of work experience now, you don't need to compensate for that. You know, it's always good to demonstrate leadership in your extracurricular activities, but you don't need to compensate for low work experience if you already have, at least 1 year at this point. Do we need a higher score if we're applying in round 2 than round 1? No. The schools are looking to, sort of more or less have an overall score that's going to be the same. So you do not need to have a higher score in round 2 than in round 1. Can you please explain the time when the admission takes place and when to give the GMAT? So if you're applying in round 2, that means your applications for most schools will be due in the first full week of January, January 5th to more or less the 8th, okay? Which means you'll want to take the GMAT sometime in November because you can only take it once every 30 days. So you want to have a backup opportunity to take it in December. So you'll want to take at the latest, although preferably before, but at the latest, take that GMAT in November. All right. We do not provide the slide deck. A couple of you had asked for the slide deck. We, unfortunately, this is a proprietary deck, so we do not provide that. Someone asked how focused on the GMAT is Kellogg. We've had people in the low 600s who get in there. It is not a highly GMAT-sensitive school like a Wharton, for example. Does a 3-year-old GMAT score put an applicant at a disadvantage? Should I retake? Nope. 3 years is totally fine. The school is good for score is good for 5 years, and 3 years is totally acceptable. Is 720 the goal for both males and females? Would you advise a lower target for females? What do you think? So 720 is a good goal for everybody. We do see a little bit more softness for female applicants. It is possible to get in a little bit lower as a female than a male, but I would still aim for 720 for everybody. Is it all right to take a recommendation from a new boss with whom I've closely worked for only 6 months? Yeah, I mean, I'd say 6 months is about the minimum, but I do think if you've worked with them for at least 6 months, that's fine. How much better is applying in round 1 compared to round 2 for HBS and Stanford? Not really that important. At HBS, they take about 500 of their spots in round 2, so there's really no advantage. Stanford, there's a tiny advantage in round 1, but it's more important to have a great application, great scores, great recommendations, great essays in round 2, versus, applying with a less stellar application. With NYU, what rounds do you recommend? Well, their round 1 is later. It's October 15th. So if you can make that, which, if you start now, you should be able to, I would recommend round 1. But, NYU takes a ton of people in round 2 as well. When do you recommend it's best to apply for executive MBA programs, for example, at Wharton? Would round 2 decrease my chances? No. Executive MBAs are a little bit more lenient about when you apply versus regular MBA programs. So that is totally fine. If we're missing several of the top 10 list, are we precluded from a reasonable chance at admission to top 10 schools? Is it possible to begin filling in gaps and missing places within a reasonable time frame at age 38 to 40? Yeah, so we recommend for older applicants applying anywhere from 6 to 10 schools. So you'll want to apply to most of the top 10. You may take a couple out, but you do want to apply to most of them. For regular applicants with high scores, high grades, we recommend 4 to 6 schools. But if you're an older applicant or you have lower scores or a lower GPA, we recommend going a little bit higher in terms of your number of schools, up to like 6 to 10. If I don't get in round 2, can I reapply in round 3? No, you can never reapply in the same year. So if you apply in round 1 and don't get in, you have to wait till next year. If you apply in round 2 and don't get in, you'll have to wait till next year. If you apply in round 3, obviously you'll have to wait till next year. So you can only apply once per admission cycle. So you can only apply once in the combination of round 1, round 2, round 3. That's it. No reapplications in a subsequent round. How many times should you take the GMAT before it is frowned upon? 3 is fine. We try to get it done in 1 or 2 with our applicants, but even 3 is still okay. All right. I'm a 29-year-old with experience in the nonprofit space. I'm a female in India. Do I have a better chance to apply this year or next year? Definitely this year. You're already 29. That's getting, on the back end. So it is better to apply this year, most definitely. As an international student, do I need to get the TOEFL? This will depend on whether your undergrad was in English and on the school's specific requirements. If your undergrad was completely 100% taught in English, regardless of where, then you, at most schools, will not need to take the TOEFL. And they know it. You can't just claim it. They know what schools are taught 100% in English versus not. If it wasn't 100% in English, then you're going to have to take the TOEFL at almost every school. There are some schools like Berkeley where it's based on the country you're coming from. So applicants from India, even if they were taught 100% in English, still need to do the TOEFL for Berkeley. So it depends a little bit school by school. Do alumni referrals make a difference? No. This is one of the biggest myths and misconceptions. Harvard has about 90,000 alumni. They get referrals from probably 10,000 of them every year. They only take people for 900 spaces. Alumni referrals do not matter at all. When I went to HBS, I did not know a single person who had gone to HBS. Neither of my recommenders had gone to HBS. One didn't have an MBA. The other went to UCLA for his MBA. It does not matter at all. Okay, we've had people who had very serious connections to HBS, for example, and who got waitlisted because their application, they didn't, they came to us afterwards. They're like, how did I get waitlisted? I had, these 10 people on my side. I'm like, your essay is terrible. That's why you didn't get in. And then we have many students every year who don't know anybody at HBS to get in. What if I don't have a great extracurricular background? Does it reduce my chances of getting through if I have a 3.7 GPA? I think that the way I would look at that is, you need to have some extracurricular leadership experience, some service leadership experience. It's really important. So you still have 4 or 5 months before round 2. Let's get you some extracurricular experience. It may be late, but late is better than never. I mean, it's terrible not to have any, so let's definitely work on that. It's another reason people get started with us now. There's a lot of things we can do in terms of cultivating recommenders, taking additional classes, getting involved in service organizations that we can do if you get started now that we can't do if you get started in November. So that's why people who get started with us earlier are far, far more successful. How does the GMAT score, GPA, work experience affect which rounds to apply in? I think if you have lower numbers, it's always better to apply in earlier rounds if possible. Early decision schools where it's binding, like Columbia and Duke, will always be easier in that early decision round than in a regular round because you guarantee them yield. So with lower numbers, the earlier the better, but round 2 is still fine, even with lower numbers, because many, many, many people get in round 2. As an Indian student, do I need to take the TOEFL? We already went over that one. Someone else had just asked it. All right. Does it matter if someone has attempted the GMAT more than 4 or 5 times? We had somebody get in last year who'd taken it like 7 times. So it's not ideal. I'd rather you not have taken it so many times. But, it's certainly not going to prevent you from getting in. When should I write a optional essay? So it depends on the school. Some schools don't like optional essays, and some schools really do. So like Wharton, MIT, they want you to write optional essays. Not because you need to explain something, but they would just rather hear about a personal trait of yours that's interesting or a hobby or something like that. Certainly, at every school, you should write an optional essay if you have a low GPA or GMAT and a good explanation. If your choice of recommenders is not sort of what they're typically looking for, meaning it does not include a direct supervisor, in those cases, you need to write additional information, but it just depends on the school. Like Stanford doesn't really like additional information, okay? But Wharton really does. So you need to sort of know a little bit school by school as well, and that's something we work with our clients on. And also sometimes the additional information you send to one school will be different from the additional information that you send to another school. All right. Cool. So one person said, what if I can't afford consulting? So there's 2 things with that. One is we do have a nonprofit scholarship, the Stratus Foundation, so you can apply for a scholarship through that. You do have to be, obviously financially, you and your family need to be financially, be able to demonstrate, I should say, financial need, okay? So, if you're making a salary of, $60, $70, $80,000, use a scholarship committee, which is completely independent from me. It's a group of academics. They're not going to choose you. I can tell you that right now. If you're making, under $40,000 a year, and your parents don't have a lot of income and assets, those are the students who tend to win the scholarship. So if you, have low income, you definitely would want to apply for one of our scholarships, but it has to be, at a pretty low level. If you're in that middle range, $50,000 to $80,000 or $90,000, the way I would look at it is it may be a stretch, but if it helps you to get into these schools that you wouldn't get into elsewhere, and you end up getting a scholarship that saves you $50,000, $100,000 later on, it's a really great investment. So I would think about just sort of what are your financial priorities. We offer scholarships for those who just absolutely cannot afford it, but for people who have to make some hard choices, it can be something, and we're happy to put you in touch with people who really stretch to pay for it, but for whom it has been a long-term investment that has saved them over $100,000. They may have spent $3,000 or $4,000, but saved over $100,000 because of our work together. So that's something that we're happy to talk with you about offline. But that's a great question. Thank you. So then somebody asked about how to calculate their GPA if they didn't study in the U.S. So the schools use something called World Education Service, WES.org. You can go on there and convert the GPA. It depends on the school that you went to, the country that you studied in. You put all of that information in, and then they convert the GPA based on a formula that takes into account the difficulty of the country in general, its grading system, the difficulty of that specific university's grading system, things like that. All right. Let's see here. All right. So do the fees for Stratus Prep vary if it is a full-time program versus a part-time program? Nope. Our fees are the same regardless of whether it's full-time or part-time because we do all the same work with you. You get all the same work in terms of profile development, strategy development, essay outlines, recommenders, resume, and some part-time programs like Kellogg and Booth and Wharton are just as hard as full-time programs. So the fee structure is the same. Okay, good. So a few people have asked repeated questions, so I'm not going to go through those again. Okay. All right. Let's see here. All right. I left my job after 34 months of experience to prepare for the GMAT because my work schedule was very hectic and I was not getting time to study with my job. I've worked with a car manufacturer in a middle management role, and I will again start working with some other company after I take my GMAT. How should I justify this gap in my work experience? Okay, you should not tell them you were studying for the GMAT. Okay, that's not going to be acceptable. So we're going to need to figure out what else you were doing that time that could be, sort of better utilized to explain that gap. Great. Well, unfortunately, our time here has come to an end. And to be fair to the good friends at the GMAT, I don't want to go over. So if you have additional questions, feel free to sign up for a consultation. I know I didn't get to everyone's question, but I did try to get to as many as I could. Remember, you have 15% off whether you want GMAT tutoring, admissions counseling, or both. 15% off until September 25th with the code BTG, all caps, 15. Remember that we're happy to provide you references. I'm happy to do a complimentary 30-minute consultation if you haven't already done one. And if you apply with us for 3 or more schools, we guarantee that you'll get into one of them. You choose the schools. And if you don't, we'll work with you for free on 3 more schools next year. Okay? So go ahead and email us, consult@stratusprep.com. Check us out on the web, www.stratusprep.com, or give us a call at 212-307-1788 in New York City. Again, that's 212-307-1788. So for all of your friends at Stratus Prep and at Piece of GMAT, this is Shawn O'Connor, founder and CGO of Stratus Prep, signing off from New York City. Thank you, and have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.